Be talking about a very important topic and to try and understand India's multilingual internet and prepare for the ICANN63 meeting that's happening later this month. May I now request our director, Dr. Rajat Kathuria, to share a few words welcoming this gathering.
Thank you, Gangesh, and thank you all very much for coming this afternoon for what I think is a very, as Gangesh said, a very important stakeholder consultation. And I think both those topics are of great interest and will become clear when we have the technical sessions. But our own involvement, ICRIER's own engagement in both these areas with the ICANN as well as multilingual internet, I think goes back several years. We started working, historically ICRIER has been known to be an organization that does more international trade, but with data flows now picking up and become a part of international trade discourse, this is only natural. It was a natural sort of confluence that led us to embark on these areas of data protection, data localization, data flows, and how internet is shaping the discourse, not only on international trade, but so many other issues. And I'm really happy that we have a very bright team. You've heard one of them, and you will hear more of them later on. Bright team working on these areas, and a bright young team. And I think it's important that youngsters work on internet-related issues, because I think they are the prime drivers and prime users of the internet. So just to, at the outset, thank all of you for coming. Samiran, the head of ICANN, is here, and he will be sort of moderating the first panel discussion. And welcome to all of you, all the panelists, and all of you who've come to contribute and help us in our engagement in this, as I said, important area. As I said, we've been working on internet policy, internet-related issues for a long, long time. And currently, we have two big projects, two large in terms, both in terms of content and depth, as well as they will extend for a couple of years, with MEITY, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. One is on internet policy. We have an internet chair, and we are conducting research on India's domain name market and the economics of data flows, as I just mentioned, data localization, data flows, etc. And second, which again was the subject of today's discussion, is on a project that looks solely at India's engagement with the institution that you're all familiar with, which the long form is Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, ICANN for short. So these are the two big projects, and both of those will sort of be discussed today, and there'll be a lot of meat and content that will sort of be incorporated in what we do with the ministry. Let me just say a few things about how our journey in this area has evolved. We started working on mobile impacts on GDP, and this we did in 2010. And I think today's internet is really, the internet was built on the mobile. If I were to categorize it that way, the impacts were very large. The mobile impacts were, could go up to 2.4%. Internet impacts are even higher. But, getting sort of digressing from the impacts, the internet in India, I think, was built on the mobile phone. But today it's become integral to the internet. Right? So I don't think that you can make a distinction between mobile for voice and mobile for data. They really become indistinguishable, because a lot of voice traffic is carried on internet protocol, internet networks, but also the fact that India's access to the internet is mostly mobile, and 90% of India's access to the internet is on mobile. Whether that's good or bad, there's a lot of discussion of that on in globally in various countries, and there is a view that internet access should be on fixed lines, and you'll get a better quality of internet and so on. But India's, as I said, access is mainly through mobile, and we're trying to improve the quality of the internet that is available through the mobile, and hopefully, when newer technologies and as 5G comes to life in India in a couple of years, hopefully the quality of the internet would improve. And that's the other point, really, the purpose of this discussion is that, there's been a big divide in the internet for various reasons, and you're familiar with it. There's been, historically, as economists, we used to often talk about the rural-urban divide, and there is a divide, not only a rural-urban divide in the internet or access, but there's also a divide in terms of speeds, in terms of content, in terms of what you can do with the internet, between geographies, between people, between demographics, between income levels. So there's a big divide. And some of the reasons are clear. I mean, that divide can be bridged by, through supply-side efforts like the BharatNet and broadband being available to everybody, to the panchayats, hopefully by 2019. So there are supply-side efforts and there are demand-side efforts. As incomes grow and content improves, you might be able to bridge the divide, both in terms of quality as well as in terms of quantity. But one of the reasons for the divide that exists, and I think has got, I may be wrong on this, but I think it's got a little less attention than it should have. Primarily the divide focused on demand side, on supply side, let's push broadband, let's get access, let's get spectrum out in the rural areas so that it can be used. But there has been attention. I'm not saying there hasn't been attention. There has been attention, but the attention on language and local content has, I think, been a little underestimated in terms of what it could do to sort of bridge the digital divide. It could be a force multiplier if you have all the other things in place, if you have the infrastructure in place, and then you have content in local languages, what we're going to discuss, then it could act as a force multiplier. But not to think of it as an incremental step, but to think of it as integral to the process of trying to bridge the digital divide. And I think that bringing that agenda on the table is important, and I'm glad in association with MEITY, we are going to be doing that. And needless to say, I mean, the team has put together some really high quality notes, and and I'm sure those numbers will be sort of discussed in the panel discussion. Most of India's population is not English speaking. There are 22 languages, various dialects, and all of that, makes India such a rich and diverse country. All those numbers will be discussed. And I think, given the fact that there's so much diversity, both in terms of sort of what you want to do with the internet, but also in terms of language and content, I think this is something that should have been on the table long ago, but happy that it's now squarely on the table and it's going to be discussed. And people are responding. Most internet app companies, including international players such as Google, Uber, provide their apps in local language versions as well. And recently, AI-enabled Google Assistant was made available in Hindi. So there is a response, of course, and markets will respond. And this is an area, internet and digital economy in India has been an area where the market has responded much better than in other areas. And a report by IAMAI, which is the Internet and Mobile Association of India, argues that local language is among the most important factors in improving internet penetration. And, as I said, it could be a force multiplier, but here it needs to be, as in IMAI's sort of suggestion, it needs to be integral to the process of improving improving access. And local language adaptation in apps and web portals are not merely a desire for connecting India's unconnected, but become a necessity. So with those initial sort of remarks, and hoping that the panel discussion and the two technical sessions that follow will provide you, rich content for discussion, and hope will provide you a lot of food for thought. But what I encourage you to do is provide, from your perspective, especially, the youngsters who are in the room, from your perspective, what you think could be some of the things that we could take to the government, or at least, take into consideration when we are sort of writing out our briefs and submissions to the government. So thank you all once again for coming and enriching our stakeholder consultations on ICANN and multiple language content. And I thank the panelists for being here. Samiran, the head of ICANN, will shortly sort of come over. May I request you, Samiran, take over and moderate the panel discussion, and once again, thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kathoria, for those words. May I now request Mr. Samiran Gupta to, provide setting the context in terms of what the organization ICANN does, and a larger discussion on the need and the status of where India's multilingual internet currently resides. Wherever is convenient for you.
Thank you, Rajat. Thank you, Gangesh. And thank you, all of you, for being here today. I'm pretty sure that some of you know a little bit about ICANN, and many of you may not know everything about what we do. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes and very briefly explain what ICANN is. As Rajat mentioned, ICANN stands for the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. We are a public benefit corporation, which is the American language for a nonprofit organization. And we are based out of California. We were incorporated there because the rules and regulations of that state at the time when the internet was at its inception provided the best possible kind of structure for us. What we do is essentially, we are a nonprofit organization, and what we do essentially is to maintain the security and the stability and the resiliency of the internet. And when I say that, it may sound a little opaque, but I'm just going to give you a very simple example. I imagine most of you or all of you use the internet in this room, and when you go to a website and you find an address which has a dot, and then right of the dot is the top level domain. So that top level domain is essentially something that sits on in a database, and ICANN's job is to make sure that the database is running, because that's the heart and soul of how the internet connects, or the domain name system connects. So there's a unique number behind that name, and the name and the number has to connect. Now, we are governed in what is known as a multi-stakeholder model, where all players, including the governments of the world, various governments of the world, the technical community, the business community, end users, and the youth, as a matter of fact, are all equal stakeholders in this process. And this policy-making process that ICANN follows is actually originated by the community. Our role as ICANN staff, I'm part of the team that ICANN has globally, is to facilitate that process. So my team and I, including my CEO down to myself and others, we do not propagate any policy. The community builds the policy through consensus, and we help execute the community's requirements to make the policy work. So what that means is This is an ongoing process. Internet, the internet is, the commercial use of internet is roughly 20 to 25 years in existence. And over this period, we've seen over 4 billion people, or 4.2 billion people to be more exact, who have connected on this medium. And this is how it has been governed. But we always seek more and more participation in this process of internet governance. And therefore, 3 times a year, ICANN does public meetings across the globe. 2 years ago, when Asia's turn came, we had the meeting in Hyderabad. Some of you in this room were possibly there. The next meeting from the 20th of October is in Barcelona. This meeting is a little special because it is also what we call the high-level governmental meeting, or the HLGM, where the governments which are sort of involved in internet governance discussions, they usually send high-ranking members, either ministers or high-level officials, to the meeting. So the HLGM meeting is on the 22nd of October, but the main ICANN meeting starts from the 20th and goes on to the 25th of October. You can join the meeting in person or online. You simply need to register. Almost all the meeting rooms, and there are possibly, I don't know the exact count for this meeting for ICANN63, but normally we have over 350 odd sessions, which run, and many of them are sort of the actually face-to-face meeting of work that is already in progress. There are also public sessions where anyone can walk up to a microphone and speak to the board of directors or even senior ICANN staff. So it's a very unique process. I thank you for your interest in ICANN. If I needed to speak more about ICANN, I could go on all afternoon and we wouldn't have the rest of the session. But I think we've got important business to conduct today. So I will not hold on to the podium much longer. I will let the proceedings start, but I'm available for any other questions that you might have at the end of the session. I hope you have a good afternoon. Thank you so much. Should I? Okay. So we're going to get started with the first panel, and I'll request my fellow panelists to join me on the podium. Can I call Ms. Sarika Gulyani, please? Round of applause for Sarika. Thank you. May I also call Mr. Ashish Modi, Ms. Ritu Srivastava, and Mr. Mithun Das. So thank you all for joining this panel, and once again thanks to ICRIER for putting this program together. Thanks also to the Ministry of Electronics and IT, MEITY, for supporting this program. Our first conversation today is really around the multilingual internet. In fact, session is called Challenges and Opportunities in Building India's Multilingual Internet. And as I was saying moments ago, the internet now has over 4 billion people connected, but as we've seen, the primary language of the internet, or the primary script of the internet, is the English language, or the ASCII, if you talk in computer terms. And obviously, there's always been the thought that why cannot we have the internet in different languages or in different scripts? Now, before we get into the conversation, I wanted to set the context by saying that what we're talking about is not only the content that you find on a website, but also the manner in which you reach a website. So therefore, in a sense, when Rajat was speaking about the infrastructure and access to internet, this is very much part of the access to internet, you know. So to be able to access the internet in your own script, in your own language, is one of the remaining challenges of this sector. And at ICANN, what we have worked on is getting the community across the globe, various communities across the globe, to collaborate with us, to help us in understanding what the rules should be for creating, for creating the script which can be readable on a computer or which can be used on the internet. So without going into further details, I'm going to introduce our fellow panelists, and then what we're going to do is we'll dive into the conversation. I'm going to request all panelists initially to make your opening remarks between, let's say, 6 to 8 minutes. I do not have a bell, but if you find me looking at you very sternly after the 8th minute, you know that you need to wrap up. Okay, so that's how we'll start. Also, the theme, and this is, I think, being the chair, it's I get to use a little bit of prerogative here. So the theme I'd like us to follow is that I'm going to request Ashish to set the context of the larger space of what are we looking at from an economic standpoint, and then I'm going to go to Ritu, who will tell us some of the challenges, and then Sarika and Mithun will help us with the solutions. Okay, so without further ado, let me first introduce Ashish to everyone. Ashish Modi on my left is the country head, corporate affairs for data Xgen technologies. He deals with all the state, central governments and embassies in India for promotion and use of linguistic-based email addresses and internationalized domain names to connect the next billion people online. He works for bridging the digital divide by removing the language barrier in the world of the internet. Ashish, the stage is yours for the next 8 minutes.
I'll make sure.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Samiran. I have a short presentation here. So I'll not take much time and quickly run through it within the 8 minutes that Samiran has provided. So I always start my presentation with this slide. It always gives me encouragement and motivation to go forward what we are doing. So it says, as you read, I dream of a digital India where access to information knows no barrier. So here comes multilingual. Why language is barrier? There should not be any barrier. So language, we consider the biggest barrier for information today. If we talk about internet, it is the biggest barrier today. So we bridge this digital divide by getting everyone online, by providing or removing this language barrier with our solutions. So the theme for today is building India's multilingual internet. The opportunities and the stats are as follows. We have as of now 481 million internet users from the last December 2017 in India, out of which 335 million non-unique users of internet in Indic. That's where I have put it in bold. You can clearly see if we talk about the opportunities. So many users are in Indic. Urban India, the total internet users are 295 million, which has 193 million users accessing Indic content, while rural India, out of 186, 141 million users who access Indic content on internet. So on both sides, you can see the use and increase of the Indian content on internet. The 23% of total non-users, or approximately 205 million potential users, stated that Indic content was a key motivator for them to adopt, internet. So there is no question mark about the opportunities if we talk about. There is no question mark about why there is a need of multilingual internet. The stats itself explain everything. That if 23% people says that they are motivated because the content was in their own language and they are comfortable, then we should go ahead with this. Why not we have more and more content in our own language? So another and the last opportunity which I see is $10 billion business opportunity by acceptance of new domains names, including linguistic domains. That's how you get access to internet. Okay, now the content is already there on internet. How you make sure you go and reach to the internet and read it? If your URLs and are not in content, Indic languages, how you are going to do it? So the domains, the scripts, the URLs needs to be also in Indic. That's how you are going to reach to the content also. This is a study done by Google and KPMG last year. It again shows the growth of Indian language users on internet. So if you see 2016, in my last slide I told you, 234 was the growth of Indian language internet users, and English was 175 million. But what you can surprisingly see here is 2021, the growth is almost, you can say it is almost next 5 years, 9 out of 10 internet users are going to adopt Indian language content, and they are likely to be Indian language users only. So the growth propensity of English users are only 175 moving to only 199, whereas in Indian languages it is drastically moving from 234 to 536, almost more than the double, the growth we are expecting there. This is again a study done by IAMI. Now what the use of this, Indic language content, where they are using it. So this slide shows you a reference that has been used in ticket bookings, sports, online job services, online banking, search engines. So what is the conclusion of this? The survey shows 70% of the internet users consumes Indic content. However, 68% of the uses is for entertainment, audio, video consumption only. So what critical services like online banking, online search, job search have users as low as 20% even in urban areas. That's why I have put it in red, because it is an area of concern. This is the challenge we are facing right now. We have to get it used more. We have to approach to these people to put more Indian content on their websites, applications to be developed around that, so that people can use it in online banking as well. So just brushing up on the challenges once again, I feel the awareness is the first and important challenge today's scenario, because if people are not aware that there is a need of multilingual and why there is a need, what they need to do, that is the biggest challenge, and that's where comes the picture of the associations who are working around it, like FICCI is doing it, like UASG is doing it, ICANN is doing it, Government of India is doing it. There is need to be more awareness sessions need to be built around it, so that people are aware in all these states in India. The acceptance. I have been meeting regularly to various states, government representative in IT sectors, all more CTOs in different companies, and it is still a challenge. To be honestly speaking, it is still a challenge for me to make them believe or make them accept that this is the future. Multilingual internet is the future. So I believe that, yeah, there will be a time come, but we'll not need to put together our efforts towards it. Knowledge, again, if they are aware, but they don't know how to get it, so there is a shortage of knowledge between the users and the developers around it. And the participation aside from multi-stakeholders, because although associations are coming forward, but we need more support from, government also. Government of India has to do more to support the private companies like us, to associations, and most importantly, the community members who are driving it forward and coming voluntarily to support this multilingual internet agenda. Just some case studies how it is being used globally. So you can see here Baidu.com, Chinese major search engine, has used or supported the IDN. Just for reference, IDN is internationalized domain name. You can have domain in your language. So just an example how they are promoting it. So you get to search in Chinese domain and it's showing on the Baidu search engine. Gmail supports sending and receiving into EI. EI again stands for email address internationalization. So now you can send and communicate through Gmail platform using your linguistic email IDs. Although Gmail doesn't provide, but it supports you by sending and receiving your conversation with that. Government of Rajasthan, I was saying that government is not doing, but that's not the case. Their state governments and other governments are also active into this, and they have offered one linguistic email IDs to every citizens on Hindi language. That's their state's official language. That's all I have for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashish. We go straight to Ritu over here. Ritu's with Digital Empowerment Foundation, and please go ahead. Why don't you just turn this on?
Thank you, Samiran, and I would love to further take over from where my colleague Ashish has left actually, and there are 2 points which I would like to highlight actually. The one is that when we are talking about internet users, the internet users are also the content producers, and they are also the producers who generate the content in their local language, who are not only the content consumers but the producers as well. And most of our internet talk is already given, and the stats is given by Ashish, but according to UNESCO, there are more than 780 languages, and out of 250 languages are lost in India itself. And out of a 250 language, 120 languages were from Northeast. So if we assume that the dialects and the language which is consumed by the India is more than 250 dialects are into danger. The second point which I would like to highlight is this, that when we are talking about the content in a language, that is still an integral part of our culture and the heritage as well. Then what we are doing with our culture, and are we losing our culture at the same time? I would like to highlight that there's 1 or 2 stories where we are coming from as a time of the challenge and as a time of what exactly the challenges exist in the rural and the remotest part of the country. There's a tribe Toda tribe in Nilgiris, and that tribe is a very close tribe, and they have their own dialect, and the population in the households is less than 1,000 people, less than 1,000 households. They have their own dialects, and they have their own the dialect, which is not written, which is not scripted. So those scripted dialects is that in danger as gradual the consumption of the internet is majorly on the English language. I have the 2 main questions which I would like to ask from the fellow panelists as well, that how we are restoring these folk artists, those who have more than 200 songs, they are vocal songs, they are oral society, we are oral society, more than 200 songs are there. How are we restoring them? How the local content is getting stored or getting kind of privileged in this society? When the second question which I would like to raise as well, that how language is becoming an integral part of not only the domain system, but also when we are transforming from the content consumers to the content producers, and how we are gradually increasing that. Because in the most of our stats, what I have seen, we are all talking about how we are consuming the internet, not how we are want to have an internet in local language. The local language is something which is missing in that context of a producer content. One of the live examples where I would like to highlight that what we had done, we in a tribal location, Baran, where we had provided the internet, and we had not given them any kind of a software or something, but we had provided them a tool that they can exchange their live stories, and they can exchange their certain kind of a kind of a stories with them as well. So the 2 internet servers were there in 2 villages, and only the school girls and school students were sharing their live stories, and which was getting audio recording were happening into the and storing into the local data server, and they were presuming it because the local farming practices, medicine practices, every practices were documented in local language. That's the way we were dealing with that. We have not done anything which is super tool and technology, but the way of a very frugal kind of a thing, that building it 2 servers, and yes, you share the stories, and that is going to be preserved. Similarly, that the kind of a Google search and every search is coming up, but the dialect is still not the Google search cannot identify the Toda language or the Gondu language, or there are more than 100 dialects actually. We have to come up far away that way. So what we are going to do with that? I'll lead the panel from here.
Thank you, Ritu, for setting the context, particularly with regards to our oral tradition of, I would say, literature, storytelling, music, song, and how new technologies, and particularly on the internet, can be used to preserve these traditions, and also, I suppose, how to bring the people who produce these art forms or this literature can be brought on to the internet. So as I promised, the solutions are going to come from the right side of my panel, and with us we have Sarika Gulyani, who's with FICCI, and FICCI is of course working on bringing, if I'm incorrect, you can give me the look, but putting together a coalition, right, of business and non-business interests in furthering the interest of Indic scripts and languages online.
I'll add on to it.
Okay, thank you. But before you add on to it, let me also tell you a little bit about Sarika. Sarika has been with FICCI for over 13 years now, and she works in the area of regulatory affairs, public policy, and advocacy in the telecoms, information communications technology, and Indic languages. So she's been involved in various initiatives, but currently one of her pet projects is the Bhashantara or rather the Indian Internet Language Alliance, and which did the conference called the Bhashantara. Her resume goes on and on, but she's a very accomplished person, and she's the right person sitting on my right to give us the solutions to what these problems and what the challenges are of the multilingual internet. It's all yours, Sarika.
Thank you, Samiran. A very good afternoon to all of you. First of all, thank you to ICRIER and the organizers for setting up this panel. I like to obviously say, like, this time I understand there's a left and right divide. Next time you'd like to have more of amalgamation, then only the solutions get out. Otherwise, you get that bridge always being there. So right now you're talking about the digital language divide. That's why the whole scenario is existing today. Anyway, on that note, Samiran has briefly introduced about it on the FICCI Indian Language Internet Alliance. I'll just spend 1 or 2 lines on that, and then I'll come back on how we see that how this alliance can contribute with the support of all the stakeholders sitting out here. I'm very happy to see many familiar faces. So that's why another thanks to the organizers that I could meet those people now. So that's very nice. Now, so FICCI has taken a lead to form up an Indian Language Internet Alliance for the reasons well quoted by Ashish and then reiterated by Ritu, and maybe I'll add on a few more figures for you to carry forward, which I'm sure you are aware of it. But since when we are here, what we need to understand is we all understand these figures exist, but what is the way forward? And if they have been existing for decades, why the work has not been moved forward so fast? So that is the reason, the whole discussion we are having it here today, so that we all brainstorm it, see how we can take the things further from here. So the Language Alliance was officially announced in last year from FICCI, and now we have around 140 members out of here, which includes multi-stakeholder group, which means technical community, we have the industry, the technology industry, we have regional public, the regional houses, online media, and we academia. So all those guys, there are different cohorts which are there as part of FICCI-ILIA. And the reason why I'm stretching on these, giving a special stress on these names is, like Ritu mentioned, and it was mentioned earlier by Ashish in his presentation, the last slide, the support of multi-stakeholders is very much required so that the work which has been done so far in the piecemeal manner across can be collaborated together. We all know, we have been hearing these words. I'll add on few jargons for more to it. We are moving towards the internet economy, almost like we expect by 7.5% GDP contribution would be happening by the internet economy by 2021. And we heard Ashish talking about 9 out of the 10 person would be the INDIC user. So how many INDIC users as of now we have it online who can actually contribute on this? So the work which is being done is like you have content creators who are creating it. They are ones who are, the government who's making the policies, and they are the content absorbers who are on the last piece manner. And then there is a monetization of the content where the businesses come in picture. But what we as FICCI-Alliance so far with a discussion with the stakeholders have identified, the path which is maintain a continuity from end to end is missing. So there are things which needs to be worked out at each level so that we have efforts which are more coordinated and which can actually lead to a good cooperation between the content starting from the creation to monetization and the absorption, and eventually contributing to the Digital India campaign of government, which Ashish, I'm sure you started with that, and everybody would voice the same. We all understand the digital empowerment happens to be one of the main features for the Digital India campaign. Digital literacy mission is on, so people are getting digital literate, and the accessibility is getting easy in terms of smartphone getting highly penetrated. We have around 512 internet users as of now, and we expect many more to come in, all mostly through the handheld devices. And in fact, Samiran mentioned about Bhasha Antara, which we recently, I'll not say recently now, it's 3 months now. In July we did it, where we actually announced the mobile test data, which IC has worked with the support of others, in 22 official languages. As a country where we stand about 22, correct me for the figures, but I think it's 22 official languages with 1,600 dialects and 30 languages and more than 10,000 scripts. I think the numbers are huge. We don't even have to discuss on that whether there is an opportunity or not. There is definitely an opportunity. The last piece, people are actually there who are getting literate, but they are not having the content. They are the companies who are ready to create the content, but they don't know how that indexing can be done in the chain so that it reaches to the end mile. And then there are people with the government whom we have to work it out to have the right policy so this can work on. So as FICCI-ILIA, we actually feel it's not going to be the FICCI-ILIA alone. It has to be with the support of you all, that we can contribute in each of these entities, and together we have to make this happen. Without any second thought to it that this is going to contribute in a big way for the Digital India campaign or New India campaign, but this is going to be, for me, I'll say it is going to be language inclusive internet, or I'll say a multilingual internet revolution which is going to come over. We've talked about the smartphone revolution, broadband revolution, so it's now going to be multi-language internet revolution. Currently with the figures which is like, we have around 0.1% of the INDIC content available on the internet for India, which is like horrifying. With 1.3 billion population, you have that much of a content, a lot many users waiting to absorb the content. So I think there is a good opportunity out here, and FICCI-ILIA, we would be happy to listen to the views, to work with you guys on each of these platforms. I have started, maybe if Samiran gives a time beyond 8 minutes later on in the second comment, then I'll let you know a couple of initiatives which we are doing it, basically on the thought leadership or policy advocacy, or working across states with the different issues, or working in terms of, say, standardization. So all those areas which is FICCI-ILIA is currently focusing on. And there are many people in the room with whom we are already working in, and we are happy to have more on board with us. With this, I will stop my initial comments.
Thank you so much, Sarika. So FICCI-ILIA is focusing on the, strengthening this end-to-end strengthening of this value chain, which starts with content creation, monetization, and absorption. Okay. We come to our last speaker in the opening round, Mr. Mithun Das with the language technology company Reverie. So Mithun heads the public sector business for the country for Reverie and has over 2 decades of experience in various facets of the IT industry. Reverie is focused towards driving language equality on the internet, with its founders having a collective experience of more than 5 decades in the space. Reverie has an end-to-end product offering for enabling Indian language inclusion in the digital space. So I turn over the time to Mithun. Over to you.
Thank you, Samiran. I think the solution part is going to close with me. Sarika gave a very nice overview, and I have been associated with Bhashantar, workshop and seminar as well. It had been a very, very engaging discussion, and the kind of audience and the kind of people we saw in that room was really encouraging. In fact, it was a great initiative. And you spoke about multi-language internet as the next revolution, and that's one belief and one focus which I think as a company we are also trying to drive. And as Samiran mentioned, that Reverie is focused towards bringing language equality on the internet. Now, what is it that it means? I think Ashish also mentioned about the disparity which we have in terms of users being able to get access to contents in the language they prefer to choose or interact in, and at the same time interact with the internet. For people who are who are very conversant with English, I think internet is part of our life. And if we are able to make that and deliver it across the 700 million internet users which we are looking in the next 3 years, that's what is going to be the language equality on the internet. I share a very strong belief that for English to grow, Indian languages don't have to die. And today, if we look at the serious contents which is getting created in the digital space is actually tapering off. There is not much content. We spoke about 0.1% of content being available in Indian languages on the digital space. And why should it that be? We represent almost 17% of the world population. With that kind of numbers, and we are also posed to be the second largest internet user base in the next 3 years. Is it really difficult for us to imagine that the internet digital economy which we are talking about, is really difficult to imagine that we generate somewhere around 5 to 8 million works or employment from this this economy burst which we are seeing. And you rightly mentioned that 7 to 8% of GDP contribution is something which we collectively can drive towards. Now, what are some of the areas which we might have to look into and maybe focus our energies and efforts? One area which I strongly feel is that there needs to be more promotion in terms of I would say encouraging more people to come forward, take pride in the Indian language space, and start working with a cause towards that that realization. That is a space where we still feel. I think Ritu and Ashish mentioned as well that we don't see so many people coming forward to work in this space. We do crib about the fact that the content is not available, but how many people do we see taking an initiative in bringing out solutions to start working around these problems? Some of the work which Data Exchange and ICANN have done in terms of the top level domains getting standardized, localized is really phenomenal. At least we are there. We have made the initial, we have taken the initial steps to make a mark in the world map. And if we are able to bring in more people within this country to work on this cause, I think a solution is right there. Ritu mentioned that some of the 250 languages in the world map is from India, and those
70 languages and 200 are lost.
200 are lost. Wow. So I think that's one area where people should be promoted more. The industry should come forward to work on this space, and this problem should not be left to the Microsofts and Googles of the world alone. I think we have enough potential within India itself, and people should be encouraged to come forward. Another space which I strongly feel that even government should look at, and industry should also be heard about, and FICCI has been working in this space, is in terms of the standardization in the language area. That itself is not up to the mark right now, and it is creating a lot of problems. Very recently, the mandate came of having Indian language support on the mobile devices. But even if we look today and we check the standardization across platforms, it is not there. If I try to send a message in Bengali and it reaches, I send it from an Android app and it reaches an iOS app, the renditions will be different. So these are challenges which we have, and if we are able to work on the standardization, promote more people to come forward and work for this cause, I think we definitely have the potential to come out with a solution and work towards that. So there are good works which are happening. There are good things, technologies which have been developed which enables content creation, search in multilingual areas, but I think it is not enough. I think we have to come together and create a force to work to this cause.
Thank you, Mithun.
Thank you.
So I'm going to take my 8 minutes now, and just plug a few things about what ICANN has done specifically, and there are members of the community who's worked with us in getting this done. So as I was saying, we have 4.2 billion of the world's population is online, and one of our mission is to ensure that from a technology perspective, the balance should not be left behind, whichever text, whichever script or language that you use. And what ICANN has encouraged is the formation of label generation rules, LGR panels. The one specifically that worked or continues to work in India is the new Brahmi generation panel. So there are 9 scripts which are part of this panel's work: Bangla, Devanagari, Gujarati, Gurmukhi, Uriya, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, and Malayalam. Incidentally, Urdu was part of the Arabic panel, which had worked separately and has already been taken care of in terms of creating the label generation rules. Now, of these 9 scripts, all but Bangla have the work has been completed by the community, and 8 of these scripts are actually in the public domain space. We've actually got some feedback, recently, and if any of you in the room have any interest in seeing how the Unicode, which is the software being used, the Unicode rule sets have been developed for these scripts. I'll be very happy to direct you to the right place online where you can check this out. The other thing I wanted to mention is, the internet has gone from its origin when right off the dot there were like 3 or 4 extensions to about, for the longest time there were 21 or 22 extensions, and now there are 1,200 extensions. Okay, the bulk of this happened only after 2012, and we call it the basically the new GTLD process, new generic top-level domain process. The interesting point I would want to say is that if, for example, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, if Ritu Srivastava sitting with us wanted to have a .Ritu, it actually would not have been possible, because at ICANN we did not necessarily have a confirmation of the rules with which we can spell .Ritu in Devanagari. Okay. Today, thanks to the work of the community, we have that. Now, when I'm saying this, I must hasten to add that the government of India has done over the last 4 or 5 years, they have propagated the .Bharat extension in 15 scripts. But it's a very simple thing that when you create the rule sets for Bharat, it does not take into account the rules required for any other letters in whichever language or whichever script we are talking about. So a lot of ground therefore has been covered by the Neo-Brahmi Generation Panel, which has members, over 60 members from India, 5 or 6 people from Bangladesh, a few people from Sri Lanka, Singapore and Nepal. And there have been others who did not join the panel but actually worked with the panel. So we hope to acknowledge all these people very soon when all these 8 or 9 scripts are launched in India in the next few months. I will now, I think I've done my 8 minutes, so I'd like to move to the question. The first question that came to us was from our co-panelists, and therefore I'm going to step back and I'm going to sort of read the question one more time and step back and seek answers from the panel. And then, of course, we can continue the conversation. So Ritu's question was, what is it that we need to do to uphold our tradition of oral culture? So how do we restore some of this? How do we make sure that through technology we actually prevent the loss of scripts or oral culture? So this is a bit of a blue sky situation, and we can take a few minutes, and I'm going to start from the other end. Mithun, why don't you take a first stab at it?
I think, I had Ritu's question in mind. In fact, what I felt is that I think storing and making contents or, data available are two different aspects. I think storing is still easier of the challenges, and we still have lots of mechanisms to ensure that things are properly archived. But we still have a big gap and big challenge in the search aspect. Even if we have contents available across languages on the digital space, I think searching that content as of today is a really Herculean task. And if I take examples, I think if we simply pick up...
Can I just
sure.
interrupt you here, and can you just explain why is it a Herculean task? Why can't we search?
I think, a space where in this space, what an important aspect which is missing is, as I mentioned, is standardization. The way the content is looked up and the way content is treated on the digital map is something which we really need to work on. The case in point, we can simply pick up our mobile or digital, device and just try and, search something in Indian language. You do it twice, you will see different results coming up. I think, that's an area where we should actually start looking at a very robust standardization and a robust way of making these archives available. I think, in fact, to cite another example, I was very recently talking to one of the state government representation, and they were talking about digitizing their archives and their libraries. They have taken up projects to digitize it, OCR the content, and get it into the digital space. But the biggest challenge was that when I asked them that how do you intend to search this database, they said we are meta tagging it. And that's not how you search content. If I am not able to pick up a phrase in the book and just search by that phrase, I think it's of no mean. I can do any amount of meta tagging, it doesn't really help it. A search tool, a standardization of how these languages needs to be looked at in this space is something which is very, very important.
Thank you, Mithun. And actually, as Sarika had mentioned, she's amongst friends. So I'm going to ask a very speculative question to Sarika. Will we see, or can we expect to see, a birth of an Indian search engine which is so robust, which can do what Mithun wants it to do, and keep Ritu on this side satisfied?
So I don't want to make the headlines out here, but definitely I'm sure the people sitting in the hall and as well as the panel will echo the thought that they will look forward to have something which is on these lines. But see, I'll just say the market is open, the scope is there, and the people who have to work towards it are also available. It is about how the efforts in a coordinated way happens that the birth of this can happen. Nobody is stopping them to have a Google from India. Nobody is stopping anybody to have another Google company being born from India. So it can definitely happen. Only thing is the market is a fair field. So everybody has to compete and they have to come out with the parameters which goes well with us. So I'm just talking about if a new Indian internet engine is born, yes, we should obviously have the hopes for that, but it has to be in the realistic grounds that it should meet the parameters, which in any case Mithun also covered. And I'll add to it, Samiran, what Ritu has asked and what Mithun has mentioned. Ritu, you've quoted one for the oral thing, but I'm sure the similar thing exists for the other parts of also. The solution for which is, see, Mithun said standardization, definitely. The compliance is one of the key areas which is missing right now. And I'll just say before that compliance is awareness. Even if you go to the smaller regional level, I'm not just talking about the oral right now, I'm just talking about in generic. People are not even aware of that the standards which needs to be complied for. So you're talking about to them that please comply it and please put it on the, we're just talking in the hall and saying that there should be compliance and so that the indexing can happen and we can have the data readily available. But it's kind of a chicken and egg story which has come up while our discussions in the FICCI-ILIA forum, that there are people who are ready to make the content and there are people who want to have that content.